Hello and welcome to Season 2 of Chapter Chat with Sarah. This season is going to take on a broader experience. You can expect some travel stories, some mystery stories, beauty, fun, and a whole lot more. Today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp, and we'll have more on that later. But first, we've had 2 interviews that didn't get through editing before Season 1 came to an end. So our first interview for this season that we'd like to share with you is Olivia. And Olivia is one of the stories in my book, Healing Your Life, One Leaf at a Time. Olivia, hello and welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Olivia, you are chapter 10 in my book, Healing Your Life, and your life had just a lot of twists and turns, starting out actually when you were just a little girl. Your mother was such a complicated and yet a powerful force, and she really captured the reader's attention, and she left all of us, including me, wanting to know more. So I think that would be a good place for us to start today if you could take us back to when your mother was a little girl.
Well, I have not really ever met my mother. The last time I saw her, I was about 3, I want to say. Any knowledge of her I've been given over time by biological siblings who I met somewhere around the time I was 17 or 18. And the stories that were told to me. I also met the head of the adoption agency who did know her, and I've had stories told to me. I was told that she was a borderline genius and that she came from a very wealthy family in New York. Evidently, she was thought to be bipolar. And in those days, there really wasn't a whole lot that they knew what to do with somebody with that condition. She was more or less abandoned by her parents, probably out of embarrassment, I would imagine, for some of her antics. And she was left to her own devices. I learned that she had 2 other children before us. She had 2 girls, Dawn and Sarah. And I originally thought they were born in California since my brother Mark had been born out there. But I later learned they were actually born in Ohio. Because she was accustomed to a wealthy upbringing, it seemed to me that she was always seeking to duplicate the lifestyle she had lost. She was a hard worker, I'm told. And I was also told that she was quite charming in social settings. Only recently, I ran across a class photograph of her. It was unmistakably her. She had very distinct features when I was perusing through Ancestry.com. The school was a preparatory school in Wisconsin. And I also found ship records from trips her parents and sisters took often to Europe. So she was surely accustomed to much more than the average person was exposed to. It really has been decades of piecing together who she was as a person since my first memory of her was when she kidnapped myself and siblings from the foster homes we had been placed in and took us to Las Vegas.
So, what about your father then?
I did meet my father about the time I was introduced to my biological siblings. They kind of put me together with him for a meeting one time. He was a merchant marine. He, I believe at that time, was a painter. He did house painting. He had owned a bar at one time. Anyway, I met him. I actually went and stayed with him for a short time in Wisconsin. He was, again, very charming. He was an interesting character.
And I think that that is a good segue into something that I thought was a shocking event that happened while your parents were still married. Now, at some point, they did divorce. Is that right?
Actually, I wasn't really sure if they ever married. I think that my 2 older siblings um, were born before they got married, but I only just recently found the marriage certificate, and based on the date, I was born after they were married.
All right, so a little complicated, not unusual, but something that happened though that kind of, took me back and also took the readers back, that it was just so hard to understand how this could have ever taken place. And that was a time when your mother and father went to New York for her aunt's funeral. And this was her rich aunt, that her aunt, I guess, was fond of her. So what happened after that visit to New York?
It's been told to me through other people that she was she went to the funeral. Not sure if it was in New York, but it was out east at any rate, and that she was given some money, and somehow I'm not sure how he managed it, but my biological father had her committed, and then he basically took off with the money. But meanwhile, there was myself, my two siblings, full siblings, and three half siblings that were left up in Munising alone in the care of a 12-year-old. So that was kind of how we became a ward of the state. We were discovered at some point, and there was a woman up there who had befriended my mother, and she took us in and cared for us until the state brought us down state in Michigan to foster care. The older three, I think, were put in the orphanage, and myself and my brother and sister were placed in separate foster homes.
And it's just so hard to believe that a father would knowingly allow this to happen. He knew when they left for the funeral that they were leaving the children home there. I just, during the interview and your sharing of that, it was just tough to hear that that took place. So all of a sudden, you guys became wards of the state. So what happened then when that took place?
Well, I don't have a lot of memory of those months or however long it was I was in that foster home. I was probably maybe 13 months old, somewhere in that neighborhood. I've been told stories because I've met the foster parents since then, and they have kind of filled in the blanks for me. But it's my understanding, or at least it was told to me, that I couldn't speak. They would sit me in the middle of the floor and put toys around me. I wouldn't respond to anything. So it was really their love and devotion that kind of brought me around. And evidently, at at some point, I began to respond. I turned into kind of a happy child, really, and they they enjoyed me enough that they actually wanted to adopt me. So that was the first go around with them.
Okay, so that was the first go around. So there's a part then in the book that, in fact, it's your subtitle in the book where it says eating onion sandwiches in the desert, which was, painting a picture, why are you in the desert and you're eating onion sandwiches? And you happen to say that this was your earliest memory.
When I met up with the foster family later in life, they told me that they had petitioned the court to adopt me, and that by then, my mother had somehow gotten herself out of the situation she was in, and she was allowed to come and visit all of us and take us on outings and things like that. Back in those days, everything was hush hush. And so when the foster family petitioned the court to adopt me, they were turned down because they had contact with my mother several times. So at some point, my mother discovered that the courts had turned them down on this adoption petition, and she saw that I was very happy there, and she wasn't very happy about the court's decision. So she got it in her head that she was going to set up a scenario where she was going to take myself and my two siblings on an outing, which was not uncommon. And instead of going on the outing, we wound up taking a trip to Las Vegas. So she essentially kidnapped us.
And you were coming from where, what location at that time? Were you driving cross country or?
Yes, and I do remember bits and pieces of that trip. She, as was mentioned in the book, we were given onion sandwiches to eat. I remember having puffed rice and puffed wheat cereal with just water on it. So she probably didn't have a whole lot of money at that particular point. She was just doing what she could.
So obviously it was illegal what she was doing because she didn't, have a good custody situation of you kids at that time. So you have to kind of stay on the down low? Can you kind of share with the audience what you were kind of told about that time frame?
Well, I was told later that she was smart enough to know that there was no extradition in Nevada from Michigan. And so she knew where to go. I didn't find out until later that she corresponded with both my foster parents and the head of the agency to make sure that they knew that we were safe. And she would actually tell stories about what we were doing, and she would send calendars and all kinds of things to them. So she kept in touch with people, but the courts knew they couldn't do anything about it. She was pretty smart.
Well, it sounds like it. Absolutely. I mean, she knew where to go and how to plan it and so yeah, she was very careful about all the details. So how long were you then in Nevada?
Well, we weren't brought back until I want to say around 4. So we were probably out there for a year and a half.
Okay.
I do have bits and pieces of memories when I was out there. My 2 older siblings used to fight a lot. I remember that. And she was waiting tables, I guess. And she would bring us to work with her. And we would sit, in the back areas. And she'd come back and check on us. I remember she showed us how to make a goblet sing, by putting water on your finger and going around the rim. We would have dinner with her there. So the memories weren't all terrible out there. Some were, but mostly it was, I just remember being with her a lot.
And that's got to be precious to you that limited amount of time that you did have that there's some good that you can recall from it. So I think that's wonderful. The other part that you shared was a Christmas Eve trip on an airplane, and that was really heartbreaking for me. And that had to be gut wrenching time for everybody concerned, you as a little girl and your mother. So, can you tell us what led up to having to leave, and then what happened on that particular Christmas Eve when you were about, I think you said, 4 years old?
She evidently, as I mentioned, many thought she was bipolar. So she had highs and lows. And those were probably some of my not so good memories. When she had the lows, she could be a little abusive. And I think at some point she realized she couldn't handle it. So she had made a decision to fly us back into Detroit. And we were put, I, well, I should go back to the plane ride. So I fell asleep on the plane and I was kind of curled up on her shoulder and didn't really wake up until we started to descend. And I remember looking down and seeing what appeared to me at that age, little cars And I asked her if I could have one of those toy cars. And she didn't say anything to me until we got in the parking lot. And then she pointed to one of them and she said, "Do you still want one of these toy cars?"
That's cute.
So, and at any rate, at that point, she put us in a cab and drove us to what I now know was the head of the adoption agency. And we pulled up in the front and she shooed my brother and sister out of the car. But I had sort of a spidey sense that something wasn't quite right and I would not get out of that car. So she'd coax me. And I do remember this particular incident to this day, really. So she tried to coax me by telling me that there was a furry little rabbit in the backyard I could go pet, and I still wouldn't budge. So at some point, the head of the agency saw her out there and came running out the front door, and there was an argument that ensued. And I got very frightened and got out of the cab and just wandered down the street. Next thing I knew, the head of the agency found me and squatted down and soothed me, got me to the point where I wasn't so upset. And I was taken back then to the original foster family that I had been in before she had taken me. What I didn't know, what I found out later, was that he forced her to sign off on us, and he said he wouldn't press charges if she did. So he somehow got her signature on that, and she left, and I never saw her again after that.
So that was the last time that you ever saw your mother?
It is, yeah.
Wow. And then on Christmas Eve, so I would imagine that's a trigger point for you at times then to remember that years ago on a Christmas Eve that happened to you.
Well, not really, because I was too young to really even realize it. You know, what the dates were. I was way too young to really understand everything that was happening. As I said, over the years, people have filled in the blanks for me. I would tell them I have this memory and that memory, and they would fill in the blanks. So it was later that I found out it was actually on Christmas Eve that she did that.
Okay. Okay. I was just impacted by that because I was trying to understand the significance of choosing that particular day and then, never seeing your mother again after that. So that's what I was feeling for you. So how long then was it before you were put into a home or were you put in an orphanage or what was the plan now that you were back in the hands of the adoption agency?
Well, my brother and sister were sent back to the same foster family that they had had before we were taken away, and I was sent back to the same foster family that I had had when I was taken away. And I think they did that because, well, my brother and sister were older, so they probably had more solid memories than I did. So, I think the thought was, and I don't know, but I'm just surmising that they wanted us to go someplace where we had been familiar, before, so that we weren't upended again.
Okay, and that makes good sense. So, in this particular foster care home that you were in, was it a good place for you? I think you said you had a good connection. Can you kind of tell us about the family?
So the family was a mother and father, and then there was an older son and daughter. The daughter was the oldest, and then the son. The foster mother at that particular time was pregnant with her third. It was a happy place. They had tried to adopt me, and so they were thrilled to have me back. And I just went on with them. So I felt secure, I think, going back there. So it was a good choice, by the courts to do what they did, I think.
What happened to your brother and sister then?
So they went back to the foster family that they had. They kept those two together, interestingly enough, and separated me.
Okay. So, after foster care, you were with a family that you really was growing close to when they were close to you. And then there was an adoptive family that came into the picture that wanted to adopt you. So, how did that come about?
Well, we know that the courts were not going to allow the foster parents to adopt me. So obviously my name was put in a hat for adoption. I do remember at one point, I think because everything I had gone through it so early in life, you have this ability to sense when things are not quite right. And I remember seeing the foster mom at some point whispering, and I don't remember if it was to the dad or one of the kids, but I knew they were talking about me. And I didn't know how I knew, I just knew. And so when she came back into the room, I just openly asked her, "Am I going to get a new mama?" And she was shocked. I mean, you could see it on her face that I was astute to that. And she sat me down and said, "Yes, there is a couple that would like to meet you. And we've arranged a meeting Sunday after church." So that was when I met the prospective family that would eventually adopt me. And I remember that day pretty vividly. The mom and dad came in, they had three boys, and they were all lined up in their little suits. And I was taught to curtsy, believe it or not.
Aw.
And it was not a long meeting. It was just a meet and greet type of situation. I remember the prospective mother had a beautiful pink suit on, and I thought she was very pretty. So that was the first meeting. And then after that, there was a second meeting where they wanted to take me on a tobogganing outing. And of course, three boys, rambunctious. But I guess they didn't really think too much about the fact that I had spent a good share of my early years in a desert, so I wasn't used to snow. And we down the hill we went, and I fell off and went straight into a snowbank, and my face was full of the snow, and I was very upset by that. I remember distinctly that the mother was not happy at my display of emotion, but I was too young to really tell anybody about that. It was just something that I remembered. Eventually, that adoption did happen, so I was adopted into this family. It wasn't a good situation, let's put it that way.
In the story, I kind of remember the day of the adoption, and you mentioned that you leaned your head over on her shoulder.
Yeah, I was gonna go into that. I always hate telling that part of the story because it was just so shocking to me, but it kind of defined the relationship from then forward. So we were in the courtroom, and I was young enough to where and confused enough to where I felt like I needed to be cuddled a little bit. So I scooched over closer to her and went and put my head on her shoulder, and she shooed me off.
In court at the time of the adoption. I just that had tug at your heart. I mean,
It did. It went to trust, you know. The foster family had built the trust back up, and that just really settled in that I couldn't trust everybody, including the people that I was gonna become a daughter of. So, yeah, it was upsetting.
yeah, it's troubling. It's troubling. It was kind of like setting the stage. Like, what's this going to be like? How old were you at that point?
I was about 4 and a half. No, I was about 4. So that everything happened pretty quickly when I came back to the foster family. I was young enough to where, I was probably a good candidate to be adopted. where my brother and sister who were older were probably unadoptable.
So there's a few things that you shared in the interview and story about your time with this family. So, can you just give us a couple of highlights that were pretty impactful?
Well, as I said, I think that court experience kind of laid the foundation for things. The I think even as an adult, sometimes I look back and I wonder why they chose me or why they even wanted to adopt. There was just a lot of favoritism. It was very clear that the mother in particular favored the boys and did not favor me. The father was a little bit more loving, but not by much. The boys were rough, as boys will be, and it was kind of survival, really.
There was a gal that they had from, I don't know, did they have her in for foster care? But you were kinda she was a little bit older, and there was a day that you were, primping and putting makeup on and having a good time,
Mhm.
spending
Yeah.
time together. That was, interesting too. So tell the listeners what took place on that day.
So this was several years later, and they did continue. This family who adopted me did take in foster kids. We had a set of twins that were deaf at one point, adorable little girls for a very short while. And then they took on this older girl who was in her teens. I'm not really sure what age she was, but I know she was in her teens. And I want to say she was probably even a junior in high school. We shared a room together. And one day I used to watch her put her makeup on. And I was probably about 9, I want to say, 8 or 9. And I was fascinated with the transformation with makeup. And she saw me watching her one day and she said, "Would you like me to put some on you?" And I got very excited and said, "Yes." So she sat me down and was putting makeup on me. Well, the mother happened to walk past the bedroom and saw this and came in and was very angry with this foster girl. Slapped her, told her never to do that again. I was too young to really understand that that was a little over the top as far as a response to a little girl being curious about makeup.
So tell me a little bit more about your adoptive mother.
Um, our relationship, as I mentioned earlier, was kind of defined by that court incident in terms of trust and things like that. But over the years, there were just incidences over and over again. For instance, if I smiled, I was told I had a front tooth grin. If I cried, I was told, "Turn the waterworks off." So it got to the point where I didn't want to really show any emotion, around them, anyways. And it was really both of them, but a good share of it came from the adoptive mother. She was very critical of anything that I did or said. And so, over the years, I was always double checking myself or just trying to hide any emotion that I might have when I was with them.
Not a good way to have to grow up, especially for, establishing your feeling good about yourself.
Yes. I also knew that there was another little girl that she had told me outright, actually very early after the adoption. She said that there was a little girl that was so pretty and had blonde hair and blue eyes, and I don't know why they were unable to adopt this little girl, but it was very clear to me, and she told me that she wished I was a little bit more like that little girl. So not good at instilling confidence. in a child.
No, not at all. So that had to cut deep as well. How long were you with this adoptive family then?
Well, I was with them until I guess I'd have to tee it up a little bit as to how things came about with my decision. The boys were always very rough with me, and one of the boys in particular was super rough with me. And we were at our grandparents' lake house, and we were out in the lake. And I don't remember exactly what this brother had done, but whatever it was, the rage in me just came up out of nowhere. And I reached down under the sand and got a couple of handfuls full of muck and put it on his head. So, just to get back at him, whatever it was he had done. And the mother came running out and said she had had it with me. She was sending me away. And I was sent to live in Detroit with her younger sister. And I babysat for her sister's friend's little boy through the summer and earned some money and things like that. When I was there for that summer, the how do I put this? The sister of the person who had the little boy that I babysat, she and I became friends. She was a little bit older than I was by a couple of years, I want to say. And I want to say 15. Anyway, this young woman was kind of a wild woman, and I followed in her ways. I started smoking. I became pretty rebellious. So when I came home from that summer, I was a completely different person. And that created a lot of problems. There was an incident with a father that took place that frightened me, and I planned to run away and did. And that was pretty much the end of that family relationship.
Today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp is a trusted resource for therapy, and it's one that helps you right from the comfort of your own home. It's their mission to make receiving therapy easier and to also match you with the right therapist. It's comforting to know that you have a place to turn when things in your life seem blurred and hopeless. To get started, go to betterhelp.com/Sarah Shaw, and you'll receive 10% off your first month of therapy. You can also find this link in the podcast description and on my website. Once again, the place to turn, and the link is betterhelp.com/Sarah Shaw. What age were you at the time that you ran away then?
So I was about 15 when I ran away, and I got a good distance away and for a pretty good distance of time until I was caught. And when they brought me back, they told the courts they didn't want me back.
Wow. Okay. So what happens in a situation like that?
Well, luckily, the judge in the courtroom, his wife was somebody at the school. I think she was a counselor at the school. And she had seen me come in with black eyes and various things over the years. I think she suspected that there was some issues. And I believe, I don't know this, but I believe she probably had a chat with her husband about potential problems. So I actually asked the court, rather than going to a juvenile home, if I could find another family member that would be willing to take me, would they agree to it? And they did. So I spent a couple of years with a cousin, a distant cousin of this adopted family. And then I went off on my own. after that, and I pretty much was on my own ever since. So, actually, I wasn't there that long because I went off on my own at 16, so I wasn't there long.
Now, is that an age that you're allowed to do that? Were you still like legally, doing something that you shouldn't at age 16, or what were the laws back then?
I think I was probably getting pretty close to 17. I did petition the court to become independent, and they granted it. So,
Okay.
yeah, I was smart enough to know to go to the courts and let them know that, that that was what my wish was, and I must have been close enough to 17 where they agreed.
And that was probably a healthy decision for you based on what you had, endured and lived with for this whole time. So, it was probably like a fresh start. What did that look like? Did you move out of that area, or, where did you go next?
No, I didn't. I actually stayed in that town. I had not done a lot of traveling. That's another thing that I guess I don't know if you have this in the book or not, but they used to take family vacations and I was not allowed to go with them. They would leave me home. So I had until I, was sent away for that summer, I had never really traveled at all. So I stuck with what was familiar to me. And I stayed in the town, continued to try to go to school and work. I met a young man through a friend of mine that his parents were, they had a church that they were building, but they were also a teacher and a counselor at a different school. And he had become my boyfriend. And they kind of saw my situation and they were really quite helpful to me in many ways, in getting me back on track with my religious beliefs and they helped me to because one of them was a teacher, they were able to kind of fast track my getting my high school diploma. And then they had set me up with working for a friend of theirs that was a chiropractor. So I would work there whenever I could, around school and things like that.
Okay. And you did touch on about that you weren't allowed to go on vacations, and that was telling. I mean, you're a part of a family, you were adopted, and it's time for vacation. How did that make you feel? I mean, I don't want to speak for you. So, what was that like for you?
Yeah. Uh, Obviously, I knew I was, I felt like the black sheep of the family, even though I went out of my way to kind of be invisible, really, as much as I could, to stay out of harm's way. They would send me to the mother's parents in Detroit, and they were very kind to me, and I actually enjoyed my stays with them. But it still, you know, was tough knowing that I was left out while everybody was, on vacation somewhere and I was not able to participate.
I know, it's hard to even believe that that took place. I mean, you're supposed to be part of a family. That's why you were adopted, and it's time for vacation. I mean, vacation is something we all look forward to, and now you're not even included. So, that was really, really hard to take.
Yeah, it was.
I think that we are now discovering, because you have a boyfriend that you recently met in church. So now are you developing some, religion in your life and some faith? And what did that look like at this age and time for you?
Well, interestingly enough, I always had a deep faith. I believe that my biological mother must have told me about Jesus because I clung to that really all of my life. But I did, and I went to church on a regular basis with both the foster family and the family that adopted me. So there was a lot of structure religiously, but it was, how do I put it? It wasn't as deep as it could have been. Let's put it that way. So when I began going with this young man and this young man's parents were actively starting a church and things like that, I actually started reading more of the Bible and getting more understanding. I still say, I mean, it's a lifelong endeavor to, to really understand everything that's in the Bible. I'm still learning. But yeah, it deepened my faith. I always had it, but it broadened it, I would say.
Did you stay with this boyfriend then that you met through the church?
I would have liked to have. He and I actually talked about marriage at some point. But after a year or so, he decided he wanted to go finish his education and become a pastor, but he wanted to go to a school that was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So we were separated. His parents actually turned their basement into a little apartment for me. So they were very good to me. They really were. But what happened in the meantime after that was that I was working at that chiropractor's office. And one day I was putting files away and I see the name of my foster parents on a file. And I remember thinking to myself, gee, I wonder if those are the same people that had me when I was a little girl. But I knew they didn't live in the area, or I didn't think they did. So I just put it out of my mind. And then one day they came walking in and I recognized them immediately. So I didn't, I didn't want to jeopardize my position for the chiropractor, for the doctor. So I didn't want to get too personal. And I thought, how can I find this out without, opening up a can of worms? So I thought about it, and finally I said to them, Mr. and Mrs. So and so, I won't say their name. Did you ever have foster children? And the woman looks at me and she goes, we had 50 and I would know you anywhere. And she named my name.
Wow.
So at that point, I knew, and I knew that they knew. And evidently, the doctor, when they went back to get their treatment, filled them in on what was going on, that I was basically alone in life. Well, they had originally wanted to adopt me. So they started their pursuit trying to convince me that there's adult adoption and we would still like to have you in our family. We loved you then, we love you now.
Wow.
But it terrified me. Trust has been a difficult part of my life up until probably the last 10, 15 years. There's always that wariness, who do you trust?
Right.
So they were pursuing me pretty intensely. Well, with the boyfriend out of the state, I was given an opportunity. I had a girlfriend that had moved out to Boston and she wanted me to come for a visit. And I thought, why not? I need to put some separation here. So I went and I didn't come back.
Yeah.
I wound up staying out there for about a year. Meanwhile, this family, the foster family, found out where I was at through my boyfriend's parents and started writing letters and things like that. I mean, they were not going to give up, and they didn't give up. So I eventually came home, but the separation between the boyfriend and I, the time that we spent away from each other, he had changed, I had changed, and we just drifted apart.
Okay. And what feels good about this is that the original foster family was so genuine. I mean, even later genuine. So that has to be a very good soft spot in your heart that they really did care about you.
They did, and the fact that they had had over 50 foster children in their home and they still remembered and wanted me
Yeah, says
was
a lot, doesn't it?
It did. Yeah, it did.
Nice. Now, years later, you had an opportunity where you spent some extra time with your father. I don't know, did for the audience, you think you moved there for a short time, but that time that you spent together, did that help to fill in some of the blanks about your father? You got to know him a little better?
I did. There really wasn't any of the three of us who were full biological siblings that thought very much of him, but I felt like I had to find out for myself. And so he had pursued me for a while and wanted me to come out and stay with him. Interestingly enough, he was, as usual, living with a woman who had a good amount of money. She owned a supper club out there, but he was very talented. I must say he was extremely talented in beautiful things, I should say. He had a bedroom that was put together for me that was like the bedroom for a princess. I mean, it was absolutely beautiful, and he convinced me to stay. And I didn't, honestly, I had no no anchors anywhere, so I could do things like that. So I thought, well, I'll give him some time. But the things that I saw there was that he was very charming. He was talented, as I said, but he was a womanizer, and I just saw things that didn't set well with me. So I didn't stay long. I think I was there maybe 4 or 5 months, something like that, and I pretty much had enough. So, and he was also a drinker. He was at the bar a lot.
So it just kind of goes back to maybe how he was when he, left you kids at home alone after the trip, for the funeral. So, gosh,
I
that was
I came to believe he was a narcissist, really.
well, fast forward to now. You shared in the book about being happily married, two grown children, happy. What is life like now? But before that, too, share a little bit about a cancer diagnosis that you had a few years back and how that changed your life and your purpose and understanding. And, it kind of all comes together now.
It does. Yeah, that was a big turning point for me. As I mentioned, I have always had faith, always, learning and reading the Bible and trying to understand things, with small groups, all of that, regular church attendance. But there was one little piece that was missing, which, given the story, you could understand that. But here I am in my 50s, and I get a cancer diagnosis for stomach cancer. And my husband and I are best friends. He's helped me in so many ways, emotionally to evolve and not look back at some of these things that have happened in my life, not let it define me, I should say. But the one little thing that was missing was trust. That you can say you have faith or you can say you believe, but do you trust Jesus no matter what? And so when I got that diagnosis, my husband, I'm a researcher by nature. I immediately went to my computer and looked up what are the percentages of survival when it comes to stomach cancer. And those numbers did not look good. So I just closed my laptop, and my husband asked me, "What did it say?" And I said, "You know what? We are not going to talk about it." I said, "I am just going to put one foot in front of the other, do what I'm told, and I'll either survive this or I won't." And from that moment on, I just put everything into the hands of Jesus. And I believe that whatever happened was the way it was supposed to be. I was very calm about it. And that has stuck with me. So I learned trust from that.
How many years ago was that?
I believe we just celebrated 9 years since I was released, from
Wow,
I was told that I was cured.
that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So prayer and positive and maybe some life changes and dealing with things that, went on, but here you are. And I know that I actually have a painting of yours that's very, very special to me. So can you share for the audience how that came about?
So after I got back on my feet, I had, a surgery and chemo and the things that you would expect. One day I was just sitting there thinking, I've been a wife, I've been a mother, I've been a grandmother, I've been a professional person, but what have I done for me? And I was thinking about it and I thought, when I was in high school, I took some art classes and I was pretty good at pen and ink drawing, which is not an easy thing to do. And I thought, well, why don't I see if I can paint? So I just taught myself how to paint and I find it wildly therapeutic. There's just something about finding something that makes your heart go pitter patter and duplicating it on a canvas that is just therapeutic for me anyways.
The artwork is absolutely stunning. I mean, it's meaningful. It seems like you can look at it and you're getting a message from it.
Yeah, interestingly enough, in my foyer is one of the first pieces I did right after I was done with all of my treatment for cancer and everything. My husband took me to Ireland. I have a girlfriend that I used to work with in the corporate world that was from Ireland. We worked together, but she went back to Ireland. And I always told him that I'd love to go see Deirdre someday. So we went, and if you know anything about Ireland, the old churches they have there are just amazing. And I love architecture, anyways. So one of the small little villages that we happened to go through, we found this beautiful old church, and I took a lot of photographs of it. And so that was one of the first things that I painted, and that's in my foyer right now.
Nice. You have left a really deep impression on me personally. And I know that you have reached out and helped other women who have gone through maybe narcissistic relationships or, bad situations, illness, etc. What prompts you to do that? What is that feeling that you shared that you want to be that person?
That's a good question, really. Just recently, I've been asked to become a Stevens minister at church. And they've been sending me letters for probably 4 or 5 years, and I turned them down every year. But this year I thought, all right, I'm semi-retired now. If nothing else, the training I think would be really good for me. And my husband is a Stevens minister and has been for about 8 or 9 years, and I've seen the transformation in him. So I thought, okay, I had to meet with the pastor before they approved everything. And he asked me what it was that I thought I could contribute, why I finally agreed. And I said, I don't think my spiritual gifts are necessarily um, keen to this, but I said one thing I can say the training will probably be helpful. You have to go through almost a year's training. But I said I won't go into all the specifics, but because of my history, I see things. I can be talking to somebody and know that there's something bothering them or there's something not right in their life. I can pick up on it very quickly. And I said, I have often found a way to help people when they were in need. And so I think that, you know, I do it because I see those things that I'm not sure everybody does. You know what I mean?
Right.
People will walk up to you and say, "Hi, so and so, how are you?" And your immediate response is, "Oh, I'm great, thanks." But it's probably not true. They're not going to tell you. But for whatever reason, I just know when it's not true. So yeah, I have done that, and I think it's born out of that history just to be able to be alert. And I had many people who helped me when I was alone, so it's paying it forward, more or less.
And I think you've referred to that, or your husband has, that it's like you have a radar. You can enter the room and immediately sense. So, and I think you're right. It's because of all the things that you lived through, and you had to kind of have a heightened sense of what was going on around you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I don't know that that ever really leaves you. I mean, I'm getting close to 70 now, and I still have that radar. So it'll always be there, I think.
Well, I think you are a real force, and I am going to be forever grateful that our paths crossed and that I learned more about you and your life. And before we close, is there anything else that you'd like to share or say?
No, I can't think of anything. I know it's a very complicated story. It's hard to follow. You know, I've been married to my husband now for, well, it'll be 24 years in a couple of weeks. And he still gets confused. Wait, who is that? And which family did they belong?
Yes, yes, yes.
So it's hard to follow it, and there are many more things involved there too, that if I even began to get into it, we'd be talking for 6 months straight without stop.
Yes,
So
yes.
I try to avoid getting too deep because it can go places. It just makes people even more curious. But,
Right.
no, I this has been an interesting experience for me as well, and, I just think it's interesting how we met, you and I. It was almost like it was it was meant to be. So,
A predestined for sure. Yes.
I believe that. I really do. So, I appreciate the opportunity to share my story, and my hopes, I guess, are that if anybody has had similar experiences, that maybe they're encouraged by something that I had to say.
And then I think that's, what I'd like to close with is I think that you are definitely someone that is an inspiration for others because you've have had a lot of, like we started this out, twists and turns and things that you had gone through that you had to stay strong, and look at you now. So we got to believe that, things can get better. So if you can just kind of, have faith, try to stay strong, and believe that, you deserve this. So again, thank you so much, Olivia, for this time. I really, really appreciate, being here together.
And I do too. Thank you very much.
So that's all for today. Both of these books can be found on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and most major bookstores. Tune in for our next episode with Katie. Until then, remember this verse. I also tell you this. If two of you agree here on earth concerning anything you ask, my Father in heaven will do it for you. Matthew 18:19. You got to run.